Welcome back to the submission channel. It's been some time since we have been on. A lot has gone on personally in our lives. For me, myself, it's been a time of taking care of my mother and my grandmother while they've been home with me. So I thank you for your patience. Definitely wanted to conclude this amazing book that I think it's fundamental for many of us to take in the context of it and apply it into our lives. So we are continuing the Anti-Mary Exposed, rescuing the culture from the toxic femininity. And we are moving on to chapter 9. So welcome everyone. It's nice to be back with you guys, and we'll get started. Chapter 9, Understanding Mary's Beauty. The splendor of a soul in grace is so seductive that it surpasses the beauty of all created things. This is a quote from St. Thomas Aquinas. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, Leah Darrow thought to herself, walking up the stairs to her old converted warehouse. As the former contestant on America's Next Top Model prepped for the photo shoot, clothing, scarcely big enough to warrant hangers, was rolled out of her inspection. I'm not really comfortable with these. Do you have something else? She inquired. Sure, you can find something else, but you will have to leave. These are your options, came the dry, biting retort. Selecting the outfit that appeared to have the most coverage, Leah tried to hide her horror as she put them on and made her way to the photo shoot, well aware that every eye was on her mostly naked body. The camera started clicking, and the photographer, sensing her discomfort, tried to loosen her up. You look hot, he said encouragingly, and all the girls feel like this in the beginning. Unable to unfrazzle her nerves, Leah made the rookie mistake of looking at the flash as the camera snapped away. Her eyes locked shut as she scrambled to get the world around her back into focus. It was then that it happened. Her eyes still unable to focus, she looked up and saw a vision of Christ. He looked at her with sad eyes, asking what she was offering him. She looked down at her hands. Nothing. Her hands were empty. She wasn't giving him anything. You were made for more, was all that she heard. And in her heart, she knew she was done. She finally focused and told the photographer that she had to go. The photographer continued to try to console her, plying with her with compliments. Really? Everyone feels like this in the beginning. She had a flashback to the day that she heard models referred to as hangers, and then thought to herself, objects don't have a problem being used. I never want to get used to being an object. Leah quickly got dressed and then had to make the longest walk of her life across the expansive warehouse to the exit. Since cajoling wasn't working, the photographer's anger flared. All the demons were out, and he unloaded. Who do you think you are? We are only doing Tyra Banks a favor. You are old, ugly, and fat. You have cellulite. You are like 1,000% unfuckable. You are only good because we make you look good. You have to fix your unfuckable looks so you can look fuckable. His last line expressed the foundation and epitome of the beauty industry at large. It was all about making women objects of sexual desire. If you leave here, you will be nothing, he sneered at her. Do you promise? Was her sincere response. She wanted to get as far away from this empty shell of a world as possible. For women, in our culture, beauty weighs heavily upon us as an external criterion that we must strive for. It is, however, an unsatisfiable ideal. The fashion industry, as we saw earlier, sets the standard for what beautiful women are supposed to look like. What they mean by beautiful is a whole lot different than what beauty is really meant to be. Here again is the chasm between our culture and Mary, between a beauty of asexual objectification and a true beauty that stirs the soul, pulls out of ourselves, and lifts the heart and mind to the Creator of all things. One is edifying, compelling, and uplifting, and the other is tawdry, seductive, and dehumanizing. Marian beauty. While researching my book, The Marian Option, in every apparition of Mary that I encountered, the visionary said that she was the most beautiful woman he or she had ever seen. Initially, I found this detail rather prosaic. Of course, Our Lady is beautiful. And then the greater importance behind her beauty finally hit me. Mary's beauty is important because it is the outward expression of her complete perfection, emanating from God's beauty. Of course, I can't turn the page, right? Oops. It is also easy to underestimate just how beautiful Mary is. The saints help us to comprehend her unfathomable beauty. She is so beautiful, Saint Bernadette reported, that once you have seen her, you want to die to be able to see her again. Saint Therese testified to Our Lady's beauty during her great suffering as a child. Little Therese turned to a statue of Mary near her bed and begged Mary to have pity upon her. All of a sudden, the statue became alive and the Virgin became beautiful, so beautiful that I could never find words to express it. But what penetrated to the roots of my being was her ravishing smile. At that moment, all my pains vanished. Padre Pio, now Saint Pio, was once overheard saying, Jesus was correct. Yes, you are beautiful. If there were no faith, men would say that you are a goddess. Your eyes are more splendid than the sun, Mommy. I take pride in you, and I love you. When one visionary asked Mary why she was so beautiful, she responded, because I love. Our Lady brought a new kind of beauty and dignity for women into the world. Up until the fullness of the teaching about her, until Christians understood her as Virgin, Mother, and Queen, the fullness of dignity for women hadn't come into full recognition. She set a new watermark for womanhood. The man, formerly a tyrant and ruler over the woman, Cardinal Mindzetzi explains, becomes a troubadour, a servant of the Lady, now that the gospel has come into the world. The spiritual beauty, which God's hands has caused to bloom in the dignity of motherhood, holds man spellbound. Tyrannious sensuality gives way in women's presence because purity, sanctity, and a heavenly radiance encompass her. Like all of God's gifts, Our Lady's beauty isn't meant just for her. Even if her beauty surpasses all others, she is the only woman made to be beautiful. True beauty is not an unattainable ideal, nor is it simply a temptation to vanity. Rather, beauty is what God wills for women. He has placed in women the desire for beauty so that we can reveal His beauty to the world. Women have a unique gift to draw men and children to them, and through them, God, through their beauty. Women are supposed to be beautiful. There is a well-known Dostoevsky trope that says, beauty will save the world. The famous Russian is usually taken to mean beauty found in the material arts, such as music, architecture, and sculpture, are rightfully being plumbed for their world saving abilities, particularly how they lead a soul back to God. But there is one stone that has yet to be unturned when considering the role the beauty plays in saving the world. Women. The desire to be beautiful is deeply embedded in a woman's soul. How do we know this? Because, like we saw with fertility in the last chapter, it is seen in our bodies. Women's bodies are beautiful, no question. They are a timeless theme in art, but also, like the fertile body, points to a fertile soul. The beautiful body helps signify the presence of beauty in the soul when we cultivate it. Each year, American women spend hundreds of billions of dollars on plastic surgery, cosmetics, and weight loss. While we can scoff at this with ohilith and say, vanity of vanities, perhaps there is something to this that goes deeper than vanity. What if God has put Oh, Lord. What if God has put that desire into our hearts for a reason? Even the smallest girl will tell you that she wants to be as beautiful as a princess. This isn't just cultural conditioning. It is something universal that sits squarely in the feminine heart. Women's magazines today offer us a different kind of beauty, a beauty to be used as a superficial means of acquiring the other things we want, to allure men, to impress our friends, or to be admired. The notion that what is beautiful should point beyond itself to the source of all beauty, the Creator, is far, far away. The hollowed out beauty that only goes skin deep makes women like whitewashed tube. Excuse me. Which outwardly appear beautiful, but within they are full of dead men's bones and uncleanliness. The beauty in the fashion industry, as Leah Darrow found out the hard way, is an imitation of beauty, an imitation of love. She describes it as a big stick of cotton candy. It looks great, it tastes great, but dissolves into nothing. Actually, it dissolves into something worse than nothing because its shallowness roams about infecting others. The woman who seeks beauty without also seeking God ends up ghostly and banal. Von Leefort says, a countenance emerges that denotes the complete opposite to the image of God, the faceless mask of womanhood. We see this face daily, sullen, pouty, joyless, serious, without a hint of a living character. The blind leading the blind. As we saw in chapter 6, the matriarchy wields a tremendous amount of influence on everyday women. The bulk of advice women hear on what constitutes happiness or healthy relationships comes from women who are acting from deep brokenness, a brokenness they have passed on to further generations. It is advice that comes from women who have shown themselves to be dishonest, particularly if it serves their political cause, and women who believe firmly that sterile sex trumps any notion of family. Their advice comes from a working environment where manipulation, self-gratification, and narcissism are the norms. Men are playthings, gender fluidity is fundamental, and coupling with other women in the singular or plural is viewed as exotic or even ideal. This is the kind of advice that will only redound into further brokenness. These women and the advice they offer are still operating under the impression that human nature can change. Since women have changed, the argument goes, Men must also have changed their desires and interests, or simply have adapted to the new version of women, which look a lot more like them, or are dripping with superficial sensuality. The reality, however, is that men haven't changed that much. Many are just waiting for the boomerang to come back, which is really interesting. For the boomerang to come back around and for women to act like women again. But the wait might be long if they keep looking to elite women for advice. The one place few women consider looking for advice, particularly about relationships, is to men. History offers incredible windows into what men think about women when they aren't afraid to reveal what they really think. Millennia of poetry, music, and literature over an exquisite picture of what it is in a woman's soul that moves men. From the dawn of time, men have crooned over particular attributes that they love about women: loyalty, sweetness, a calming presence, kindness, thoughtfulness. Homer, Dante, Petrarch, the Beatles, Elvis, James Taylor, Sting, the Grateful Dead, Tim McGraw, and on all speak of loving a truthful, kind, loyal, soulful woman who brings them peace. The message from men hasn't changed. Take, for example, this from Shakespeare's Sonnet 29. When in disgrace with fortune a men's eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. And I look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising. Haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark, a break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Or she walks in beauty, by Lord Byron. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. These timeless poems, joining the thousands of songs written for the women who are loved for their goodness, beauty, honesty, and loyalty. Not to mention the women that inspired the likes of poets Dante and Petrarch, Beatrice and Laura, who have served as great muses for poets to the ages. This sort of fair love that exceeds the lowly regions of the soul could not have come about without the role played by the ideal woman. The Virgin Mother and Queen contrast this ideal with its opposite. Songs have not been written for nagging, angry, or self-absorbed women. These are simply not the qualities that lift men's souls. Pastor Bill Johnson of the Bethel Church once told a story of how his wife inspires him. Scripture says I'm supposed to fill my mind with certain things. If I am struggling with that, here is what I do. I will think about my wife because she is everything. In verse 8, Philippians 4:4-8. He continues, she is true, so absolute, so life-giving. She is so lovely and praiseworthy and virtuous. She is so excellent, and all those things. Just thinking about her goodness helps him recalibrate, he explains. I will start to think specifically about the goodness of my wife. And it is hard to be mad at anybody if I am thinking of those things. Women's beauty isn't meant to fuel our vanity. It is meant to both reflect the goodness and love of God and also draw those around us to Him through our gifts. The beauty, both of body and soul, has arguably been the most powerful evangelical force for Christianity in history. Why? Because men crave it. They look for it and want it permanently in their lives. Some secular women, having tried everything, are now considering that perhaps they should be nice to their husbands instead of constantly nagging and voicing their disappointment and rage to him. With 70% of divorces initiated by women, there is ample blame to attribute to husbands, but little to no discussion about what women might be contributing to the split. In a shocking admonition, love expert Andrea Miller over at Your Tango, a website dedicated to love and relationships, which also has a section on zodiac signs and horoscopes and isn't remotely Catholic, has suggested the radical idea that a wife's job is, in fact, to make her husband happy. She explains, too often these women, even the strongest, smartest, most independent of them, weirdly believe that if they inflict enough pain back into their partners or exact enough control of them, they will suddenly get with the program. Instead, the opposite usually happens. Their partners, not feeling loved enough and tired of feeling nagged, controlled, and criticized, do the opposite. They withdraw and tune out, and the cycle of drama and dysfunction only becomes more vicious and protracted. Miller goes on to explain that after realizing the pain she was inflicting upon her spouse wasn't making either of them happy, she tried something else: tenderness, less judgment, and punishment and more affection. The results, she explained, were brilliant. I started tuning much more actively into my husband, prioritizing him, touching him regularly, holding his hand, sitting very close to him, hugging him, rubbing his shoulders, etc., more actively praising and appreciating him, and crucially, not letting my ego get the best of me and not letting my need to be right lead to Armageddon. As a result, I have managed to bring out the best in my husband. While bringing out the best in her husband, Miller brought out the best of herself: kind, warm, thoughtful, compassionate. For decades, women have been told that somehow we can be happy without these things. But the real secret is as old as poetry and song. Arriving at true beauty is one of those ironic qualities that populate ancient storytelling. It arrives as soon as it is no longer sought. The truly beautiful woman knows that her real goal isn't superficial beauty. And it is the wise man who knows that this woman must exist and is worth seeking. Sadly, such women are not easy to find. As a result, men are left with surrogates that may briefly satiate the body, but will never satisfy the soul. Yes, the beauty of women will save the world far more quickly than any painting or sonata. The real battle is to remind those made to be beautiful to embrace it as its source. It is not found in any cosmetic surgery or diet or facial cream, nor is it in seduction, sarcasm, cynicism, cursing, narcissism, greedy ambition, or power. It is simply in embracing the lives of others, allowing them to live in us, and then to serve their needs. It may not always be glamorous, but it is always beautiful. In the end, the desires of women's hearts are to be beautiful, to be fruitful, to have their dignity respected, and most essentially, to be known and loved. Mary is the perfect model of how all of these things come to pass in the one who is loved by God and who has an authentic relationship with Him. Living Catholicism offers women all of these. You open your hand, you satisfy the desire of every living thing. And this concludes chapter 9 for us, which is a beautiful chapter to speak on understanding Mary's beauty. It's pretty simple. The beauty comes from our connection and relationship with God, because it is truly having this relationship with Him and in being one with the Creator that our true inner beauty comes out. When we leave space to empty ourselves of the things that are worldly, our selfishness, our pride, our ego, our need for status, vanity, all of these things, right, that are not of God, they are of the world. When we make the choice to surrender these things to the Lord and allow Him to empty these things from us and actively, turn away from these things that only bring us death in a certain kind of way, and we allow the space to be filled by God, and we nurture this relationship, and we water the seed that has been planted within us. He is the one that shines through us. His beauty is the one that shines through us, and how we speak to the other, and how we love the other, and how we treat the other. It is Him that does all of the glowing, I say, right? It's not something that we do in our own strength and within our own will, because anything good that comes from us is not something that we do on our own. Anything good that comes from us is Him manifesting Himself within us and through us. So it's a beautiful thing to see that in contrast, to see Mary in contrast with the standards of societal beauty now. That it's not the external thing for how it looks, right? Because they did say like she was so beautiful, but she was beautiful due to the grace of God that was within her. And how opposite it is now, right? Like the virtues, all of the virtues and things that Mary stands for, that totally go in contrast to what it is that the world specifies as beauty. Plastic surgery, to destroy the creation that is the entity of what we look like, in the physical, in our face, in our weight, in our all of these things, simply for, they mentioned it in this chapter, for women to have the allure of men, or to look provocative, or to seek to fulfill something within us that in reality the only one that can fulfill it is God. So I really love this chapter and how it speaks of beauty, because I think it's a standard that affects many of our young women in general. I fall into the 40s category, women in general, but especially like our young ladies, they have the standard of beauty that is social media and filters, and this is what your body should look like. And if it doesn't fall into these categories, they're told that they're not beautiful. And to see that when we're with God, there's a sense of beauty and dignity and value and virtue that goes with everything that aligns with Him, that makes you beautiful, right? That makes you, I think in days that, compared to how I lived my life before, in days that I have been my most stressed, right? And recogida, like they say in Spanish, my most stressed and looking elegant, that I've gotten the most compliments. And it's because in my communion with God, in my prayer life, in my receiving the body of Christ, in my confessing, and all of these things that line up, to see that the radiance that comes, the joy that comes from me, comes from being in communion with Him. And that beauty radiates in a different way. There's a glow about you that's totally different, that goes beyond skin deep beauty, that it's opposite to what societal beauty is. That to me, that's the way that I lived my life before, the showing your body and skin, and using yourself as this, as a tool for pleasure in a sense, and thinking that this gratification of attention from men is a validation, is worth it, and it's not. It's demeaning, and it hurts the soul. It hurts the soul of the woman, and it hurts the soul of the man, because in this society, to me, it's true. Men are in search of this woman that can be the woman that we're created to be, which is kind, loving, nurturing, all of these things that I think society strips women of, because they're teaching us to be the man and to nurture things in a man status that we don't belong in. So I thank you for this time. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, and I pray to the Lord that I get to stay on tune so we can finish this book and we can start a new one. Okay? So thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.